Have a seat, Rabbi Ray. Thank you.
Gives us life. Life is eternal. To the source. Praise is. And as this is done, please just stare a little bit yourself.
You can be seated for services. Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
We gather here today on this Rosh Chodesh, Iyar, the start of the new Hebrew month, in which the state of Israel recalls the defenders and victims on Yom HaZikaron, on its Memorial Day, where they will take and stand and pause as they remember those who have been lost. And then the next day is Israel Independence Day, Yom HaAtzmaut. And then at the very end of the month, there is Yom Yerushalayim, Jerusalem Day. It is the day of the reunification of Jerusalem in 1967. These modern holidays and observances remind the Jewish people everywhere that the land of Israel and the people of Israel were one. Today, we recall that Gary Allen, Anshul, Getzel, Golden found solidarity with Paula, her sons and family and friends, and the land of milk and honey, Delran, New Jersey. Mizmor LeDavid. Adonai miyagor b'yohalecha, mishkam bahar kodshecha, holech tamim uvoel tzedek, v'dever emet v'yol. A psalm attributed to David. O Eternal One, who may dwell in your sanctuary and who may dwell on your holy mountain, he who lives with integrity, who does what is right, and in his heart acknowledges the truth, whose tongue is not given to gossip or slander, who has never done harm to anyone, who does not reproach his neighbor. In his eyes, a contemptible person is abhorrent, but he honors those who are in awe, honoring the Eternal One, by doing what is correct. He stands by his oaths, even to his own hurt, and never accepts a bribe against the innocent. Osa ele lo yimut le'olam. Whoever does these things shall stand firm forever. O compassionate God, send comfort to those who mourn the passing of Gary. Paula, the love of his life for 36 years. Sons Philip and Dave and their dear Patty and Christy. Brothers Rich and his Judy. And David and his Steve. Granddaughter Katie and grandson Sam and Nate. Other relatives and dear friends who are gathered in this place to mark the extraordinary life of Gary Allen Golden. Grant courage and strength to those who are in darkness at this time, at the loss of Gary as they walk through the valley of deepest darkness. Be ever there with us as we move towards the green pastures of healing and of hope. You are ever our merciful one. You are our rock, and you are our strength. So let us say, Amen. At this time, Rabbi Michael Paris, our esteemed spiritual leader at Temple Sinai of St. Vincent, where the Golden family has been staunch members for decades, will continue our service.
Thank you, Rabbi Feinberg. Thank you all for coming here today in support of the Golden family. In Judaism, we believe that the body and the soul are two separate entities. That in a natural process at birth, they come together, and at death, they separate. But whether you believe in the literal soul, I do, one thing is for certain. The people we love, the people we've lost, they remain a part of us. The stories we share, the memories we hold, the laughter we heard, that's all right here. When you go forth from this room, as we all will, how will we honor Gary's memory? By telling his stories, by sharing in his life, by remembering that Gary was more than his death, that he had a beautiful life with a beautiful family. That's how we honor his memory. We continue our service with Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And let us all say, Amen. A psalm of ascents. Out of the depths I call to you, O Lord. O Lord, listen to my cry. Let your ears be attentive to plead for mercy. If you keep account of sins, O Lord, Lord, who will survive? Yours is the power to forgive, so that you may be held in awe. I look to the Lord, I look to him, I await his word. Of Israel, we wait for the moment for the Lord to come in his steadfast love and his great power to redeem. And let us all say, Amen. I turn the service back over to Rabbi Fox.
Gary was born in New York City on January 24th, 1948, just over 3 months before the State of Israel was to be established. His parents, the late Sheldon and Rita, raised Gary and his brothers Rich and Dave in Connecticut. Gary received his bachelor's degree from Marietta College in 1970. His fondest memory of that period, the attendance at Woodstock at the end of August 15th through 17th, in the middle of August, the weekend of August 15th through 17th. Barbara told me not to say it, but that was our wedding day, the 17th. We missed him at our wedding. Don't tell her I said it, please. He received 2 master's degrees and earned his PhD in library information science from the University of Illinois. There he took a job as a librarian in the State University system for several years before coming to this area, to Rutgers University, in his position as the director of the Paul Robeson Library there at Rutgers Camden, a position he held for 30 years until his retirement just about 5.5 years ago. Shortly after moving to New Jersey, Gary met the love of his life, Paula, whom he married in a very cold December 27, 1992 day. The heaters were broken at Temple Sinai. We were all huddled together as Peter Schmeidler, of blessed memory, made sure the heat lamps were moved in the right positions and working. Paula worried, Gary smiled. What were those things that brought Gary happiness? Well, the little things. He loved to travel far and wide to Europe, especially when David and Christy and the boys were there. He just loved that experience with them, eating gelato and all the other wonderful things. Also going to the Middle East, including Israel and Africa, and to the West Coast to be with Katie and her folks, Phil and Patty. He also relished the near trips, and they were especially down to Atlantic City. Right? And Paula has a very humorous tale about one casino homecoming. Please ask her about that if it doesn't show up a little later. They also loved the visit to United States National Parks, built on Gary's love of nature and animals, all but squirrels and chipmunks, especially in his own garden. Gary liked to go on walks with friends. I was lucky to be one of those. And he loved stopping at the Bodega there and getting a lottery ticket in the mall, and it really lifted his spirits. And I could see a big smile after he would buy the ticket. And it was a smile as he was remembering and trying to plan all the wonderful places he and Paula could go to if he would just win. Going to the theater and concerts in New York and Philadelphia, and then out to dinner with the friends also warmed his heart. Gary, as grandpa, thoroughly enjoyed the time he spent with Katie and with Sam and with Nate. He talked about that constantly on our walks. He found such joy in doing whatever Paula wanted to do. When he was with her, Gary's face just lit up even more than usual. Sitting in his favorite chair, he would watch the Eagles and the Phillies play with delight, usually anyway. We all know the Eagles and the Phillies. Making others laugh and putting a smile on their faces was also a hallmark of our dear Gary. William Thackeray noted, "A good laugh is sunshine in a house." Gary brought that sunshine in. Gary became much, much more than just a stepfather to Philip and David, from whom we will hear in a moment after Gary's brother Rich now shares with us as we celebrate and ponder Gary and his life with us.
I would just like to share some of my early memories of Gary. And my earliest is I was 5 or 6, learning how to ride a bicycle. And it was Gary who was teaching me, because our father was not very athletic, never rode a bike, never played sports. And a few years ago, I said something to Gary. I said, I just have this memory of you picking me up off the sidewalk. And he started laughing. He says, "That's right. You kept falling and getting back up on that bike. I tried to get you to go into the house because you were bruised on the knees and the elbows. And I refused and got back up on that bike and finally took off on it." And then he said he came running after me because it looked like I was heading right into the street we lived on, which was a fairly busy street. So I said, "What did you do?" He said, "All I could think about, how am I going to tell this to my parents?" That was scary. Not only did he teach me how to ride a bike, which I still do, 2-3 times a week, he taught me how to play baseball, football, skating, Risk, Monopoly, and I have memories of those challenges forever. And our big sport together, one of them was wiffle ball, which we kept playing until not too long ago. He taught me how to play golf when I was 13 and got a golf set for my bar mitzvah, which he had also gotten at his. He took me with him and his 2 friends who were quite a bit bigger than me, could hit the ball quite a bit longer. But he always was willing to take me along with him because I had nobody who was a golf buddy at those days. It's one of those things he taught me that I still do today, probably 3 or 4 times a week. I'm looking over at my wife, who probably hopes I would be playing 6 or 7 times a week. Those are the kinds of memories I have of him growing up. And I think I'm fortunate because David, younger brother, doesn't quite have those memories. He was 6.5 years younger than Gary. And I guess Gary, by the time he got through teaching me those things, had enough. He was much older and had other things on his mind, like girls and his friends. But I will say something to David. One thing for certain, he protected you. Not from your friends, but from me. Every time I taunted or tried to do something, he was there backing you up. And again, he was a lot bigger than me, so he won. Once he turned 18, he left for college. And the next time I saw him was 4 years later at his college graduation on one day, and the next day his first marriage. So there's a long gap between that. After that meeting, the next time I saw him was at my wedding almost 4 years to the day later, and Judy and I got married. She had never met him until the night before, and which I found kind of a little odd, but you know, he was in school, I was starting school, and he didn't have the funds to get back and forth, and I think we still kept in contact in whatever ways we could in those days, which was usually by a short phone call because we didn't have cells and it was way too expensive. Fortunately, after our wedding, we did see him again, not long after. He was up in Boston where we were both in school, and he took us out to dinner at a Chinese restaurant. We walked into this place. It was not in Chinatown in Boston, but just north of Harvard Square on Mass Ave. We walked into the place, we sat down, and we realized there's no silverware. It's just chopsticks. And everybody was eating with chopsticks in the restaurant. So I said to Gary, I said, I'm not sure we should stay here because either Judy or I knew how to use chopsticks. So he just proceeded to unwrap the chopsticks from their containers, gave us each a set, and taught us how to use it. A skill both of us today probably use every other week because we eat a lot of Asian food. In our later years, as we always saw each other maybe once a year, occasionally twice a year. We would talk as we got older about what life was like, what was meaningful, and as Rabbi indicated earlier, we constantly talked about Paula, Phil, and David, especially how you guys accepted him into your lives, because when we got together with Paula, Judy and I talked about it back in those days, about the concerns of families melding together and how that would work out. And you guys are just the best example I can think of how you accepted him. And not only did you make him proud and accept him as a parent, your spouses have, and your 3 kids have. And that's all he would talk about, with joy and love in his voice. So I just want to thank all you guys for doing that for him. It made his life much better. Thank you.
So, I always believe that sometimes in order to relate to somebody else, especially opposing views or whatever, you need to, take a moment and look through their eyes. And so I think the best way to remember Gary and honor his legacy, I'm going to need to take you for 30 seconds, so please bear with me to transport yourself through my eyes. Being a 14-year-old boy, coming of age, figuring out the girl part, and your mom is dating. There are a few misses along the way, and somehow my upbringing and Jewish upbringing somehow got mixed into all this because my mother at the time joined a Jewish dating group where I would sit halfway up the landing and see her off, and she was looking beautiful to go out to this mix and mingle thing at the time where they had them in hotel banquets, and I just thought the place just went nuts after Shabbat. I couldn't quite figure out what was going on there, but I would always sit at the landing or sit halfway at the steps and smile and wave and tell her that she looked wonderful and see her off for the night and think, God, Illinois is testing me. So she would come home and she would be very honest with my brother and me about the time that she had and who she met, and she would come home for a time or two and she would talk about this kind of guy who was a librarian and she wasn't sure, and he asked her out and she doesn't know what to do, and the only thing I could think of in my 14-year-old head is, Gary's making the moves on my mom. So anyway, let me fast forward a little bit. I can't remember if it was the first or second date, but again, as a 14-year-old boy, you're influenced by music at the time, and I got a kick out of, and still do, out of rock trios. I was into the Police, and I was into Rush, still am. And Gary pulls up in his 1986 blue Toyota Camry with the sunroof open and the windows down, and he's playing Genesis. And I thought, how bad can this guy be? He's pretty good. And the thing that really struck me, though, that day was not only the music that he was playing, of course, that kind of fed into my 14-year-old brain there. But he came up to the house, and I remember it was a very lovely day. I remember being outside. I don't remember who I was with. I remember being outside and seeing this man pull up. And so he had the sunroof open and all the windows down. And, you know, I'm in my 40s now. I would have the sunroof closed and the windows up. I'd have the air conditioning on. But it was a very beautiful day. And the thing I took away from that, as an adult now, reflecting back, he's listening to great music. He's picking up a beautiful woman to take out on a date. But there was something extra in Gary's life that day. And that was the weather. And he wanted to just bring that into his life. And so we did a little bit extra to probably have the wind blowing all over the car, right? In order to bring in such a nice, lovely day and to make his life just that much better, to have him look forward to that date a little bit more. So, of course, you know, there's, fast forward a little bit, there's always the famous story, we can go into this later, about how he gave my mother some flowers, and she thought it was too early, and she threw them away. And my brother and my grandma and I thought she was nuts, and we pulled them out of the trash and kind of explained how wonderful that is. But the thing that really struck me is Valentine's Day wasn't necessarily a thing in our house. There were random Tuesdays and Thursdays and Sundays and Mondays where flowers would just show up. And so, you know, we didn't need to mark a moment for something. Gary was just spontaneous and made our lives just that much better. And we can just keep going on with the stories how my brother and I were in high school, and he shows up on a Wednesday with 4 Billy Joel tickets, and quick, down your dinner, we're going to the Spectrum, and we're going to go see Billy Joel. Just surprise us with Billy Joel tickets. And, you know, a little bit later on, Gary had me work at his library, and I just didn't shelve books. There were times on occasion, John, before you, where he was one of the first directors to kind of wire up their computers at the time to be on the network to better the students. And so he gave me the experience to work with computers, which actually carried me into my lifelong career now of what I do and help sustain my life and my wife and my daughter. So, you know, it's all these little extra things. And during their honeymoon, Gary and my mother called my brother and I up on their second night of their honeymoon, going in Atlantic City, going, "You got to get down here." We're like, "What?" "Come down tonight. We want you down here tonight. But you're on your honeymoon, Gary, Mom, you know." And so, David, you probably remember going down. You know, Gary could have gotten any suite, right, he wanted, but he did that little extra. There was this gorgeous 270-degree view honeymoon suite, more rooms that you could count, and the hot tub oddly in the center of the place, but you know, I seem to remember that. But you know, again, he could just get a honeymoon suite, or he could take it that little extra step and make it extra special, and then want to share it with people. I think we had dinner, and Dave and I were kids at the time, ran around. You know, we were teenagers, but ran around just amazed at this place. So, I guess the one thing I'm trying to hit on here with what my brother and I saw in Gary was he wanted to make everybody in his life feel special. And in order to do that, you know, sometimes we just hope for a particular special moment, or there's a baseline of what we would want to feel satisfied in our lives. And Gary would just find that little moment, and this wasn't a material thing, he would just dial it up a little bit, make it a little bit special. And it always made us feel special in our lives. And that's what Gary did, was when you wanted to feel loved, he made you feel extra loved. And so, if we were to carry a legacy in our lives, this is how I like to think I carry his legacy always, through my wife and my daughter and my family and my friends. I'm hoping that Everybody can feel Gary's love and has been touched in the same way. That you feel special around Gary because he takes what you would hope to feel good and he just dials it up a little bit and makes you feel really special. So my ask to you is to continue on with Gary's legacy with your loved ones and continue Gary's legacy in your lives as well.
I feel upstaged. Rabbi told us last night that we could take as much time as we wanted, and I told him that that was a mistake. One of the weird joys about having to do this is to, you think hard, as Phil did, about, the meaning that somebody has had in your life. And for Gary, it's hard to narrow it down. It's hard to select anecdotes and funny things because there was so much. Phil told you about his first date with my mom, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the second date because there's a point. So there was a first date. Gary drove up in the Camry. Mom threw out the flowers. Unclear whether there was going to be a second date. And then Gary called, and I answered the phone, and he asked me out. He asked me to go to a hike in the Pine Barrens to see. It was like a hike and a nature walk. There was going to be a guide and a cranberry bog. And we used to joke that that's how Gary got my mother out on a second date, because he knew I'd want to go, and maybe my mom was hesitant, but she wasn't going to let her 10-year-old go with a strange man, and so it was a second date. And that was the joke, and Gary would play along, and maybe there was some truth in that. But in thinking about it lately, I don't think that that's actually what happened, because in the 35 years after, I never saw him do anything duplicitous. Or conniving. I thought that the psalm that Rabbi picked out to start was such a perfect psalm because that was him. He just was incapable of that sort of deceit. I think now, in retrospect, what happened was that my mother talked about us the entire first date, and that he saw this thing about a hike and knew I would like it because I was way into the Pine Barrens at the time. And so he just called, genuinely, because he knew I would enjoy it, and that's what happened. Of course, I'm glad, because there was a second date and then a future. I think Phil hit the nail on the head about how Gary would find little things to just make life better. My example of that I was thinking about, just because the pictures happen to be in the room that I'm staying in now at the house, was my mother has a tree that she likes. It's this big, beautiful tree in the middle of the park. It used to be a farm or a Greenland Center, the dog park. Some of you who know the area know this big, giant tree. And so my mother loved this tree, and so Gary would make it a point to take pictures of the tree and bring it home. Pictures in the summer, in the fall, in the spring, in the winter, in all kinds of weather, just because my mother liked the tree, so he would take pictures of it for her. And they're really beautiful, and then they framed them, and they're now hanging in that room. But it's just, what we learned from him was to take those little opportunities, to do nice things for somebody. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. I mean, he proposed to my mother publicly at a marching band competition, so he was not above a grand gesture. But it was the little gestures that I think counted. I didn't know until I asked my mom last week whether Gary ever wanted children. But I knew that he never wanted stepchildren because he never treated us as stepchildren. We were always his children. And his parents and his brothers and their families just kind of wrapped us up. We were Goldens, and we were really funny because they were very loud and really funny and really boisterous in a way that we hadn't seen in quite some time. And so it was just so fun. So thank you all for bringing us in. And as much as he loved us, as much as he loved my mom, and he loved me and Phil, as has been mentioned, I think he loved his grandchildren even more. Just loved you guys to death. I've been thinking a lot lately about dignity and honor. This sort of comes up a lot when you're in a situation. And it's funny because I think Gary was one of the most dignified people I know, but he was also really goofy. He was just goofy. So he had a couple traditions, or Garyisms as we call them, or words that he invented. One of them was he insisted that we sing a particular song every time we cross the state line in a car. It sounds like a fight song. It may be a college fight song. We don't know. We tried to figure it out. He went to 4 different colleges. It's none of those. It's not Rutgers, because that's where I went. Maybe we'll sing it later, and you guys, somebody can figure it out. We may never figure it out, because the irony of Gary insisting that we sing the song is that he was tone deaf. And he would sing with abandon, but I think that this may have been an actual fight song that somehow got translated through Gary's tone deafness, and so now it's its own thing. And the funny thing is that my children carry this tradition on, and so we also sing whatever this fight song is every time we cross the state line, which is particularly difficult because we live in Washington, D.C., so we're always crossing in other states. Although then also there was a different song we had to sing if we crossed from New Jersey into New York across the George Washington Bridge. So these were the things that Gary insisted on. He decided somewhere along the line that the opposite of the word inept is ept. And so anytime that he was able to fix something in the house, which wasn't all the time, he wasn't the most handy person, but when he did, he was very proud of it. And so he would do this little dance that he called the ept dance, and he would insist on saying how ept he was. He also used to tell me all the time to do my homework. When he met me, I was 10, Phil was 14. It kind of made sense as he became a parental figure. He was always writing us to do our homework. He would check on me in college or in law school. He would tell me to do my homework. I graduated from law school. I was a practicing attorney. If he called me in my office, he would tell me to do my homework. That's how we did almost every call if he called me during the day. He'd check in, we'd say whatever we had to say, and he'd say, okay, go do your homework. Okay. The funny part about that is that, although it was a joke, Gary cared very seriously about education. Obviously, you have to if you're going to go and get 4 degrees. But he also cared so much about his job and being part of the faculty at Rutgers. It's so lovely to see all of you here. He loved that place. He loved being part of that community. He loved the work that you were all able to do for the university, but also for the city, which he cared a lot about. And so he was so proud of all of you and all the work you were able to accomplish. Gary lit up every room he was in, and it was never by showing off. He was warm, he had a great big smile and a better laugh. He made people feel welcome. He loved his family and friends, he was kind, and he was gentle, particularly with his wife and us, his children, and his daughters-in-law and his grandchildren. He sought ways to honor the people that he loved. He loved his life with equal amounts of joy and integrity, and he never saw joy and integrity at cross purposes. He taught his children not by instruction, but by simply being a model for living the good and being good.
Thank you so much for sharing those personal glimpses of Gary at different stages of his development and yours along the way, and that his life lessons have carried through to this day. There's a poem called He's Gone by David Harkins, and I've adapted it a little bit. It's a poem that captures what Gary would wish for us. You can shed tears that Gary is gone, or you can smile because he lived. You can close your eyes and pray that he will come back, or you can open your eyes and see all that Gary has left. Your heart can be empty because you miss him, or you can be full of the love that you shared. You can turn back on tomorrow and live yesterday, or you can be happy for tomorrow because of yesterday. You can remember Gary and only that he is gone, or you can cherish his memory and let it live on. You can cry and close your mind, or be empty and turn your back. Or you can do what Gary would want. Smile, open your eyes, love, and go on. Please rise. Elohai Salichot, Hanun V'Rachun Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed, Amsei Kaparat, Pesha V'Hakarava Yesha, Umenucha Nechona Al Kanfei HaShekhinah, B'Ma'alot Kedoshim U'Taharim Kazohar Harakia, Mazhirim, Et Nishmat and Shogetzo Ben Yishaya Natan V'Rezel, Shahalach La'olamo, Ana Ba'al Rachamim, B'Seder Chamela V'Ora V'Chanin V'Yasrecha, Kenafecha V'Hastirehu Le'olamim, Utzror B'Tzror HaChaim Et Nishmato, Hu Nachalato, Ve'anuach v'shalom al mishkabo v'na'amar. Amen.
Protect me, Eternal One, for I seek refuge in you. I say to God, you are Adonai, there is none beyond you. Adonai is my allotted share and portion. I bless Adonai who has guided me. My conscience admonished me at night. I am mindful of the divine presence, who is at my right hand. I shall never be shaken. So my heart rejoices, my whole being exalts, and my body rests secure.
May the soul of Gary be bound up in the bond of life through the example of his life. All those little qualities that gave such reassurance to his family and his friends, being emulated by those who loved and survived him. The Eternal One is now Gary's portion. May he rest in eternal peace with the Eternal, as we say, Amen. Tehi Nishmat Tzror B'Tzror HaChaim. May the soul of Gary Allen and Shogetzel Golden be bound up in that bond of eternal life. You may be seated. Donations in Gary's memory may be made to the Lewy Body Dementia Association. You can find that online, or to the charity of your choosing. Also, there is a Minion of Comfort tonight at the house, and that's at 109 Pine Valley Road in Delran. It'll be tonight and tomorrow. We chose 7:30. 7:30 this evening will be the service, and you can come obviously before that to extend your condolences.
Will the pallbearers please step to the center aisle? And I'll ask that you rise once more, please.